And I would like to let you know that conversation, like meaning like you sharing stuff in this workshop is very much welcomed. This is a discussion-based workshop. Nobody's obligated to speak, but definitely welcome people sharing of themselves, people sharing of their ideas, their experiences related to this workshop. Because I think people really benefit from that. They really benefit from hearing from others. And also, it's also healing for yourself, healing to be able to share your own experience too. Okay. All right. So I would like to get started here. And everyone, you could close your eyes and you could imagine that yourself at the bottom of a rocky valley. Imagine that in this place, it is really dark and this valley is really craggy and it's really hard to see your way ahead in this valley. Then you see a hot air balloon in the distance and you start to approach the hot air balloon. And then you get into the hot air balloon and then the balloon rises slowly. So as it's rising, you are going up. And as you're going up, you finally make your way out of the valley. Finally, you're not in the valley anymore. And actually, you see much more. You could see much more of the landscape below you. You could see different things. You could see different trees below you and also all the different kind of vegetation. And you look around, you could see the sky and it's like a breath of fresh air because you were stuck in a craggy cave. You couldn't see anything at the bottom of this cave, but now you're out of this cave and you are out high above this craggy valley. So I want you to open your eyes. Open your eyes, and I'm going to talk about this meditation. It's about kind of where we find ourselves in life. I bet you've all been in a position before in which in one particular area of your life, it's really hard to see your way forward. It could have been in school, it could have been at work, at a workplace in the past. You know, it could be now. Like we all experience that feeling of getting lost. So everyone has areas where they're clear in and they're less clear in. And then you can think about a time when you have a lack of clarity about something, but then you found yourself on the other side. So you're able to make it to the other side of the tunnel. And you see that, hey, I made it through and the way forward is clear. So this is what this meditation is about. Sometimes we may feel like we're in a place where we're really stuck and there's really no way forward and there's no opportunities or possibilities. But it's possible that through practice, through the things that you learn in this workshop, you could slowly raise yourself. You could raise yourself in your hot air balloon up into the sky and you could see more of the world. You get a broader perspective on things. Has anybody had this kind of experience before that they felt very lost, but then things became clear? They have more perspective on the world. Raise your hand if you'd like to share. Okay, so I could share myself first. So for me, I had like a pretty deep depression before. So I had this clinical depression for 2 years. But even before that depression, I had dysthymia. What dysthymia means is the blues, right? So I always felt like life was kind of blue. I saw life in shades of gray, and that's as long as I could remember. And it's really felt like then it was impossible to see my way out of it. Like maybe my brain is naturally this way, naturally depressed, or maybe my situation naturally, there's not, there's no possibilities. There's nothing ahead of me. But now looking back, I feel very differently. I see things very differently. So I was seeing my life in a new way, and really helped that I have all these psychotherapeutic tools at my disposal. So some of the things I'm going to be presenting today, because they help me to see things in a different light. And sometimes it just takes the experience itself. So after, it was after when I was depressed, it's really hard to see things in any sort of positive light, or to put things into perspective. But then over time, I was able to come to insights slowly came to insights over time. And I felt like all this insights really built up. And right now, I would say for a long time now, I don't feel depressed. And I feel like my mood is a very different place. It's stably in a different place than it was before. I got to see.
You wanna go and bring some?
Excuse me. So anyway, does anybody have an experience they would like to share?
I can. Hi, hello everybody. My name is Rashid W.
Welcome.
I can. Thank you. I got a story I can share. So when at the end of relationships, I used to think that they were just very, very hard because of my attachment style. So I read a couple of books, and I actually talked to someone who also suffers from social anxiety, but they actually have a background in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And they heard me out, and they really gave me a lot of great tools, like different books, different videos to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I started learning about what I was doing, how I was just miserable after my relationship, and going back, trying to get the girl back, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, eventually she would ignore me, and she wouldn't want to be bothered because it was over. But I didn't know how to let go.
Yeah.
But just through learning some new tools, I thought that I would be that way forever. I just thought I would be lost, stuck, and it just feels like the end of the world. You don't want to find nobody like the last person that you were with.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that through the tools, through the things that I've learned. I don't feel that way anymore. I'm actually happy. It was easier for me to move on after I got that advice, and
Yes.
it was just some things that was invaluable that was learned, and it just gave me a totally different perspective. So
Wow.
that's how I can relate to that.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable like that, sharing that there's something that you had difficulty with. And what I see is that you broke out of a pattern. But when you were in that pattern, it's really hard to see your way out of it, because it seems like it's an ingrained habit. And yeah, I met a lot of people, especially my clients, but this is true with people just in general. Like there's these habits, and because when you're in the midst of a habit, when you're in the midst of like a pattern of your behavior, it can be really hard to see your way. It's like it looks like it just happens to be the way I am, but like it is quite possible to change a pattern. I see these patterns change a lot, and at a day-by-day level, it's hard to see changes. But like sometimes when you look back a year, you see, wow, I really made a difference. And it's each time you make a difference. Each time you do something new, it could feel very hard, right? But you get used to it, and then it becomes easy. So sometimes, like the first day, first day at the gym is always like the weirdest day. Like feels like it's really tiresome. You may even feel sick, but then you can get used to it. You get used to it, and your body adapts. The same thing, your psychology adapts, and actually, your mind and your psychology are linked, very much linked. So your psychology could build new habits, new ways of seeing. And I definitely have a strong belief in this, that we could create a new set point in terms of our happiness and our well-being, and that this set point could change over time. I certainly have seen it as a therapist. Okay, so here's the next part. This is a picture of Bruce Springsteen, and he's dancing away with this young lady back in the day. So dancing in the dark. The idea of dancing in the dark is that, you know, when you are in the bottom of that valley, the dark valley, it can feel like getting out of that valley is impossible, right? So if people are telling you, hey, why don't you just get out of the valley? And why don't you just think positively? It's actually not very helpful. It's not very helpful to just say, just think positive. So what Dancing in the Dark is about is allowing yourself to be there in the dark, to be in that place, which is, it may not be making you happy, but when you could validate your experience, when you could first validate your experience before you reframe it, it's a lot more helpful. It's more helpful to acknowledge where you are at and know and really experience and be with the emotions that you have right now. And you may be suffering now. Maybe right now it's a hard time. I want to let you know it's okay. And it's all right to have these emotions. It's all right to feel bad. And the thing is, you know, where we are right now is not all there is. And there is a way out. There's a way to a better, there's a way to a better place in life. And but it's a process. It's not something we just change, like, you know, just flip the switch and say, hey, let's just be happy and positive. There's something very shallow about that. So it's not all about positivity. What do you think it's, you know, what's the problem with a platitude such as just be happy? Anybody? We have a platitude like that? Andrew.
I think the issue is happiness is often just a feeling. You can't necessarily control the chemicals in your body and, you know, the immediate reactions. You know, I think speaking for myself, if I try to force myself to be happy, then it'll be without context. It'll be artificial. I'll know that I'm not doing something honest. And then I'll feel guilty or remorseful or frustrated that I'm not already there. So it'll often make me angrier or more upset than before.
Yes.
Whereas I think if I'm just being honest with the situation and, like you say, dancing in the dark, then, you know, then I'm at least moving somehow and I can respect that. But I have to have the honesty first.
Yes. Yeah.
The vulnerability that comes.
I think that, yeah, that's said very well. It's about being really honest about yourself. So there's an aspect of this about like keeping it very like real and earnest, because saying just be happy is very superficial, first of all. And second of all, it doesn't make people happier because it's not clear. Like if someone's feeling depressed, it's not very clear how to be happy. Like saying just be happy is very vague advice, and is also, it can also cause a bit of suffering too, right? Because it just makes the person frustrated about not being happy. I think there's a way of like taking our difficult experiences and then over time through process and understanding to be able to find a place for our difficult experiences, right? And that's different from just being happy. I hope like over time that we can be happier, right? But the main thing is like we find meaning in our experiences, that we find something that is, so positively, like there's a degree to that. That's true. Like there's something good about positivity, but that's not all there is. And, you know, an extreme is not very helpful. Anybody else?
For me, I think it comes off a little bit judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, sometimes people need to be careful with their delivery.
Yes, like it could seem very judgmental as well. Someone else wanted to say something, but
yeah. So I think just be happy tends to push away your present emotions and your thoughts. rather than trying to work with it and empathize with them.
Right. So that's a good point about this is about the process, right? So actually, when we push away our feelings, what we resist persists. So we end up feeling those emotions more. Like if they're kind of negative emotions, we feel them more. But like when we treat it as a process, like something that we integrate and we could own, it's different. Somebody else has their wanted to say something.
Yeah, I could say something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think there's a different way to also look at that when you tell someone or think about just be happy. And it's kind of refocusing off of your negative problems. And there was that very, very successful song that came out about 8 years ago, the Happy song.
Mm-hmm.
And that was super popular. And my girlfriend said that she had a big problem, but then she bought that song and it helped her just be happy. And, I know it's not going to solve your problems, but a lot of things don't solve problems. And sometimes it's just taking a little focus off of the negativity and just trying a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm older now, and I never resolved my problems, no matter how much I worked on them for for a few decades.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just like a process that you're trying to do different things and try a little this and that. I don't think there's that many magic bullets out there in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never found one. And then I think a lot of people don't, but maybe some people do, because I know a lot of psychologists or therapists or medical doctors, they still suffer the same things, even though they have all that kind of training.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
So I just wanted to say that.
All right. That's a really good point. So I think it kind of goes along with the idea that there's actually a place for everything, right? So, there's also the song, don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. And I can enjoy listening to that too. There's like a place for that. And it's helpful at times to distract ourselves and put our mind off of something. And there's other times, more helpful to process what we're going through, the difficult experience. So nothing is very black and white. It's not all about like, either be with sad feelings or just be happy. Maybe there's different times to exercise those things. So there's a place for there's what I'm saying is that there's a place for all of that, and they all can be helpful when it comes to healing. Blade Runner.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think one's idea of what happiness is changes as one goes through life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're younger, like it's not that difficult to be happy, right? And I think that that phrase "ignorance is bliss," it does play into it. That can be thought of or interpreted as negatively, like ignorant, but also it's just. Like, for example, when you're younger, you don't know about a lot of the world, right? The cynicism and skepticism and the darkness of the world hasn't really been exposed to you. So, you can be happy with some ice cream, right?
Yes.
And watching your cartoons or whatever, like getting a toy on Christmas or, getting a gift on your birthday will make you happy, right? But like, as one gets, as one goes through life and you go through disappointments and all that, and also as one becomes ignorance is bliss. So if the more I think perhaps not necessarily the less likely that you're happy, but so much more about the world that it just becomes like a kind of a challenge of being happy, because that it's almost like, should I be happy or am I letting my guard down here? And like genuine moments of happiness are like rare. I think. But when you feel them and you feel that they're genuine, it's it's really amazing to feel it.
Yes, it is. I think that's really well put. I think you're putting it really well in terms of how the human experience is like and how the human experience is experienced by people. So, I mean, there's something to like when people say, or like there's some books that say that kind of reconnecting with our childhood in a way, like being able to see things from a fresh perspective. Yes, Blade Runner.
As you get older, like one possible moment of like genuine unfiltered happiness could be like the birth of one's child.
Right.
You know, like if you have like you're when you get married, hopefully, hopefully, right? But then like when you have your, you know, if you're going to have a family and you have that first child, it's like there is that, just like there is nothing that can happen that can, you know, temper that emotion. Not that I would know, because I don't have any kids, but like I think that's it's like a really pure kind of happiness that, you know, it gets harder to like ice cream isn't going to cut it, right, when you get older, or it might, depending on the situation, but you know, it becomes more complex and subtle, like what makes one happy.
I think you're saying like there's something about like maybe the simpleness of being a kid, but like the benefit of being adult, or maybe the drawback too, but it's the benefit is that you see things in a more nuanced kind of way, and maybe even in a meaningful perspective. But there's also an aspect of the way a child looks at things too, which is also very meaningful too, which is something that we could remind ourselves to look at things in a fresher light, an innocent kind of light, but also to integrate that with the adult perspective, and not one is better than the other. That there's also that finding that as people are like teenagers and young adults, that their emotional regulation is not that great. We tend to see things more black and white, kind of like what you're saying, like kind of simply. But over time, that regulation system becomes stronger and stronger, and because we could see more nuance. So there's another hand up here. I don't know the name. It just says iPhone. You want to unmute yourself?
That's me, Ilian. This is me, Varsha.
Hi, Varsha.
Okay, so I am a student of Vedanta, and I have learned that the sadness is a thought, and it is a dark thought. If you don't pay attention, it is going to go away, and it is like uninvited guest. If you don't give importance to guests, they're not going to come to your home. So don't give importance and let it come. Don't fight with them also, the thought. And why I'm this, more you dwell, more you go down more. You will think more about that. But if you don't pay attention, it will just pass by.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice in terms of it's still providing space for our emotions, that our emotions kind of pass by, but not like putting too much focus on it, kind of, and that's when it could intensify, but neither do we push it away. Something that's helpful after you first validate your experience is to not use disempowering words. So I'll give you an example. So there's a kid who was bullied by the other kids, but this kid was very resilient because the kid has his own hobbies. He has things that he likes to do, but the parents and the adults, the teachers, they were concerned about him because they saw that he was being bullied. So they labeled him as like a bullied kid. And when that kid learned that he was bullied, like as a kid, he didn't really have a conceptualization of it. Of course, he knows that he was not treated really well by the other kids. But when he was labeled as the bullied kid by the adults, he actually started to feel disempowered. He actually started to feel worse. And then even though he had all these good things happening in his life, that disempowerment, by that use of the word bully, he started to do worse in school. So this just shows how words could potentially have impact on us. Again, I don't want to say words are everything. So it's important to how we use our words. At the same time, words are not everything, meaning it's really how we interpret words, right? It's really how the kid interpreted that word bullying as well, and how we look at the words. So something that's useful, and this is something I use in my practice too, like if people are not treated well by others, and you say, oh, that, and the person says, oh, these other people are really putting me down, they're making me feel bad, and I can't help it. I can't help it when they do these kind of things, and then they make me feel very angry, and I want to I want to lash out, right? And I frame it in terms of, oh, these people are trying it out on you. They're trying to do something that's unpleasant. They're trying to say unpleasant things to you. And somehow using that frame, trying it out on you, rather than people having, so people are making me feel angry or they're making me feel sad, right? That people are trying it out on you. What do you think is that difference there? Why does saying the words trying it out seem different? So like when we use the words trying it out, so you can actually use this for yourself. Like when people seem to be bothering you, try to frame it in terms of like they're trying it out on you, because that shows that they don't have, for you, they don't have 100% control over you, right? They're trying to influence you, but they're only making an attempt. They're attempting at influencing you. So when you look at it as trying it out, it seems less disempowering, right? It feels like you have more control over this process, and you have control over how you think about how people are treating you. So it really depends on how words are used again. So like when we have conditions like social anxiety or bipolar disorder, ADHD, try to look at it as a helpful kind of tool. So some people, when they get that label of social anxiety or they get that label of depression, then they start to feel very disempowered because they think that's all they are. All they are is someone who has who's socially anxious, someone who is bipolar, someone who's ADHD, a depressed person. And that could be or an alcoholic, that could be very disempowering to them, depending on how they use those words, because they start to confuse that with their identity, who they are. But it's useful when you use these words in terms of like, that you have a certain condition and that it's only a part of you, that social anxiety is only a part of you, or bipolar is only a part of you. And you use these words for research reasons so that you could understand the nature of social anxiety, how it tends to exhibit itself, how other people with social anxiety you can learn from online or attending these groups, like how have they handled their own social anxiety? What did they do about it? So those are when words are useful, right? So it really depends. Like basically the idea of this slide is don't use words in a disempowering way. So I'll give you an example of the naturally depressed brain. So actually, when I told you about when I was like really depressed, that I had seen a professional, and a professional told me, well, maybe you have a naturally depressed brain, right? And I actually remember feeling really disempowered by the thought, like, wow, like I have a brain, and that's all my brain is that it's a depressed brain. There's nothing I could really do about it. And I know that person was well-intentioned, trying to help me out, maybe try to like put it into context. But actually, when she said that to me, I actually got angry because I was like, naturally depressed brain. There's not something I could really accept. And actually, it turns out what she says is not true, because I'm pretty confident now, because I've been out of depression for a while. My mood is pretty stable. There's a time when, after depression, my mood would fluctuate a lot still, but like, so when I was depressed, it's like really down, but then it started to go up and down, and eventually it became much more stable. And I realized, this is just like a conceptualization that people have, that it's like a label, and it doesn't have to be the case. And I think there's more to it. I think maybe, yes, there are different kinds of brains, and maybe certain brains may have qualities that make it more prone to depression in a way. But I also see it from a more broader kind of point of view, that I have a brain that's also naturally sensitive, and that makes me kind of empathetic and artistic. And when I am able to channel the use of my brain that way, in that direction, it's actually very useful because I'm able to empathize with others. That's how I'm in this profession and able to do some artwork, when I am able to channel my brain. And also the thing is, I'm not actually depressed anymore. So I think there's something like, it's kind of misleading to say naturally depressed brain. I think it's broader. I think it's much more neutral than that. So like even ADHD, before they looked at ADHD as like, it's just completely a problem. It's all about inattention, not being able to sit still, being disorganized. So it's labeled by negative traits. If you look at the DSM, which is, well, it's basically the manual that therapists use to diagnose clients. All the ADHD is completely defined by negative traits. But I believe that there's actually a strong correspondence between ADHD and creativity. And I went to a research program in which there's a professor who advocated that every single time a child gets tested for ADHD, they have to get tested for creativity as well. So I'm not saying like there's people who with ADHD, they don't experience any problems. But I don't think that's all that they are, is problems. I think there's more to it than that, there's also positives that go along potentially with ADHD as well. And there's also correspondence between creativity and bipolar disorder too. And also people who have social anxiety that may be naturally sensitive or naturally empathetic. Any questions, thoughts? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, it just made me when you said that, but I always believe that what you just said. I always believe that whatever your weakness is also your strength, and you just gotta figure out how to use it. And I remember Kanye West. You know, Kanye West suffers from mental illness issues. He's worth $2 billion. You got to keep that in perspective. And the thing is, he always says, I mean, one of his albums, he says, you know, it's my superpower. It's my superpower. It's not a problem. It's a superpower. And on certain levels, I always believe that whatever your weakness is, it's your superpower. So for instance, if you are bipolar, or if you do have ADHD, or you do have social anxiety, you can readily see somebody else with similar issues, and that similar power may be you're a better help. You're somebody that they can relate to.
Yes.
And you'll find in your daily life that especially if you have a personal job, like you're in an office or you do hair or something like that, you're helping out many people because your unique perspective of looking at the world is different than everybody.
That's true.
So that makes it special.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I don't believe there's like a hierarchy of people, right? Everyone has values and they have gifts to bring to the table. And I think you put it right. Actually, like, it's said that the way that we heal others is often coming from a place of where we needed to heal ourselves. So where we need to heal ourselves in our lives is really often where we end up healing others. Andrew.
Yeah, I thought Rashid was spot on there, how your weakness is your superpower. I basically agree. Yeah, like I think for myself, I deal with trauma, and I see pain in general and any negativity as kind of a push that, is my body telling me that, like I deserve a better position. It's my motivation for change. It's a drive that, I think maybe under quote unquote normal circumstances would drive me towards like an achievement. And then the initial unpleasantness or the fear or whatever then gets kind of countered by a sense of relief and accomplishment and power.
Yeah.
And so I think that anything that's quote unquote negative is something that's going to be moving and is something that's going to go away. And I think knowing that like I can take something that would otherwise terrify me and turn it into a source of power and motivation is a really awesome thing, because it not only for me kind of takes away the fear of that thing, but then I get into an even better position than I might be without it.
Yes. Yeah, that's really well put. I think, and this is probably like a lot of people's experiences too, that there's this psychologist named Alfred Adler, pretty famous psychotherapist, and he talks about, he's the one who brought the term inferiority complex into modern day lingo. You probably heard about inferiority complex, but he didn't see it as a bad thing. He says this is actually when we're turning that inferiority into a superiority, as he says, there could be something positive about it. Sometimes it could be done out of like maybe a sense of desperation or wanting of maybe out of insecurity, and maybe it could begin that way, right? But there's this whole transformation process that takes place. Often, like where we see our weaknesses is where we start to grow our own unique strengths.
Yeah, I think what you just said kind of made me realize that most people, they tend to run away from the negatives rather than find the positives. And I think rather than finding issues, if you try to find opportunities, it's more helpful.
Yes. Yeah, being able to see the opportunity in what's negative, and also being able to integrate the negative and positive rather than to run away from it. That the world's not so black and white like that. Wonderful. So I always like to tell people to look at things in terms of usefulness and non-usefulness, or helpfulness and not helpfulness, right? Rather than things being good or bad. And so what makes words unhelpful or not useful? Words are not useful if they're stagnant, global, and unhelpful. So I'll let you know what I mean by that. Stagnant means like if the word kind of gives the impression of a non-changing quality. For instance, naturally depressed brain could give the impression to people that this brain cannot change. It's something that remains. So it's not useful that way. Global, meaning that it applies to all cases. Like there's no variation, there's no nuance. That's global. And unhelpful is like it's not really helpful to you, right? So we might hold on to how we use words because we maybe used to it, or we think maybe it's true, right? But also ask yourself, is it stagnant? Is it global? Is it unhelpful? Is it something that makes you think that you'll remain in somewhere negative, or there can't be any changes that you can make? Maybe that word does not serve you anymore. So really think about whether the word serves you. So can you think about some certain kind of labels that are not useful, that do not serve people?
Saying always or never a lot, like definite. Yeah.
Yes. So like when we use words like always and never, and usually seldom the case that things are always or never, and it's not helpful either because it can make things seem very black and white. Anybody else?
Words as in you should or you need to be.
Yes, you should, or yes, exactly. And it's something I talk about often in my workshop, using words like have to or should or ought. When we use those words, they kind of create a sense of tension or pressure. And when we feel that tension and pressure, it's actually harder to operate. It's harder to think about possibilities and opportunities. Rashid?
I've never met a group of people that I've ever seen in my whole life that it was all. And I was like, I've heard people say, well, all of them will do this, or all of them are like that. It's all is a negative can be a negative connotation as well.
Right. Yeah. So it's not helpful to lump people that way as all or never, because you don't really see all the nuances, and you don't really see things for what they are. You won't see people as who they are, because immediately what shows up is like a label, very simplistic one. Mushki.
Okay, so I think like talking about your problems in present tense is not ideal. So like if I could say like I can't make friends, I never make friends, or not even never, but like it's good to add in the past. Like so when you're like talking, instead of like confirming your issues, just say in the past it was like this, and that really does something to the brain. So like I find it helpful. So like when I'm saying like I can't make friends or I'm depressed, or I just say in the past, even though it might be in the present too. But just like saying that like changes the whole like inner dialogue and reinforcement.
Yes. Yeah. I think tenses, for instance, that indicate past, present, future could make a difference. So often, like with clients, if they talk about a problem, I reframe it in terms of this is something that is happening right now or for now, or like if they can't find hope, for instance, that they can't find it yet, right? Or if they can't find a solution or to work with their problem, it's not something they could find in a moment or they can't find yet. So it helps them to realize maybe like that's the current feeling about the issue, and it could feel like you're at the bottom of the craggly cave right now, right? So if you look at it as I'm in the bottom of the craggly cave, you might start to think this is where I am right now, forever, at the bottom of the valley. That's what I'm going to be forever. But when you look at it as like, this is what's happening right now, and you can't see your way out yet, then you see, oh, actually, maybe at a future time, it's possible to look at things differently, to be able to get out of that cave or rocky valley. Yeah. Anybody else?
And well, I just have one more quick. Also, maybe like saying when statements instead of if. So instead of like if I get the job, when I get the job, right? So like more like confidence and saying when instead of if.
Yeah, there's different ways that you could reframe or look at things for sure. So what's helpful is just to look at the practicality of the labels in the metaphor. So again, this goes with the idea of like asking yourself, is it useful? Is it helpful? So even positive qualities can be misused. So like there's certainly good things about being competitive, right? But if you're competitive all the time in all circumstances, that's not helpful. And people often mistake things as like permanent qualities. So if they think competition's good, they might start to think, oh, it's always good, right? So it's helpful to look at these terms more like tools, and you have different tools in a toolbox, and these tools are useful at different parts of life. So maybe in certain circumstances, like you are playing a sport, you need to be competitive, right? Or maybe a salesperson needs to be competitive at times. But it's also useful to use other traits as well. And it's good to other times be much more diplomatic. So you could probably think about somebody, everybody could probably think about somebody who's so focused on a trait and how it should be like what everyone should be all the time. But that's not the case, right? It's actually helpful to look, it's actually better to have different kinds of tools or different types of tools to use. So think about like anxiety. So is anxiety always bad, right? And I think it's useful to reframe anxiety as like a kind of a car alarm. So if you have anxiety problems, maybe your car alarm is overactive right now. And when you work with a therapist or, you work on the issue of anxiety, the alarm just needs to be reset in a different way. So it's not as sensitive as before. So the good thing about this is that it's not saying like you have an anxiety problem and that therefore you should get rid of your anxiety. So it's actually not helpful to simply look at your problems as problematic symptoms. Like oh, I have anxiety. It's terrible. I have to get rid of all of it. Right. But maybe it's just your car alarm going off. It's a bit overactive, but a car alarm is useful. A car alarm alerts you to when your car is being stolen. So maybe it's about tweaking that car alarm. And you can look at it in other things. Like if you look at your ADHD or social anxiety, look at it in a similar kind of light. It's not about getting rid of all of it, right? It's that maybe there's underlying the condition, there's something that is useful about it. And the condition just needs to be reset in a different way. So let's go on. So it's much easier to go towards something that's positive than to stop something that's negative. So for instance, if you want to stop smoking, it's harder to think about it in terms of, I want to stop smoking. And your mind's focused on trying to stop something. It's easier to go towards a certain behavior. So it's easier to think about in terms of, I want to be smoke free. Why do you think this is the case? That it's easier to go towards something positive than to stop something that's negative? Rashid?
I think it revolves around that experiment when they tell you don't think of a white elephant, and that's all you can think about.
Exactly. Yes. Your mind gets stuck there, right? Because often, like when people are so focused on problems and how to solve those problems, their mind ends up just being in that problem state. Andrew.
Yeah, I could hardly have said that better. And yeah, it's like a reverse psychology.
It is.
That's right. Yeah, like it's true though. You do think of like something super. You fixate on it. Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah,
I forgot what I was going to say. Such a good point. Yeah, well, it's like you're fighting against yourself. You know, I mean, the reason you got into like the smoking or whatever was you were trying to do something. And so, like, you know, then you feel like you're taking a step backwards. Then you feel like, you know, you're, just like a kind of conflict. Whereas, like, you could say, like, hey, you know, I'm going to use the nicotine patch instead, or, you know, I'm going to, like, find something else to spend my time on. Then, you know, you're not, and part of what motivates a person to maybe, like, smoke or doing something or, like, unhealthy in the first place is they're trying to cope with something else before then. You know, they're trying to solve some other problem or to find some other joy that's lacking. So, like, if you just focus on the negative, then you not only have the shame of the thing like smoking, whatever, but then you're back at square one too.
Exactly.
So it's like extra misery there.
Yeah, there's that sense of it's not simply about stopping the negative. It's the problem that people are facing. There's something deeper behind that. Just like what Andrew says, that they're using that quote unquote negative in order to cope with something that's deeper. So when you're going towards something, you're going towards behavior or a way of being that's in line with addressing what that deeper issue is. Like maybe you want to live a healthier life. That's why you don't want to smoke, or you want to address what's underneath the addiction difficulty or the addiction issue. And address that deeper source somehow.
So this reminds me of a joke where the person goes to the priest and says, "Can I smoke when I pray?" And he says no, but then he goes back and says, "Can I pray when I smoke?" He says, "Yeah, you can pray when you smoke." So it really depends on what you emphasize. Right? When you say positive, that stands out. Even to your mind, it stands out. And
that's a great way. Like the framing of it does make a difference. Though you know that won't help with a smoking issue.
Yeah,
that's going to continue the smoking issue. What was I going to say? So so sometimes when I have clients who are very focused on the problem, they always try to see like what is a problem and what's going wrong in my life. Then I started to think about like I actually asked them the next week. I asked them, you know, what's getting better? So what is getting better in your life? So to kind of focus on something that's a bit more towards the positive. So it kind of reframes your mind away from trying to just get into the problem and towards something like, and it does make a difference. So it causes people to think differently about how they work with their problems. It's actually easier for such clients to, like, when they stop focusing on just simply the problem itself and towards kind of creating a more positive direction, they actually end up addressing their problems better. Okay, so the next thing is, like, as I said, sometimes that label social anxiety could be useful because you could do research on it, but sometimes it could cause anxiety. So if we kind of only look at ourselves as we're socially anxious people, then, and how can I solve my social anxiety? It's not a very easy place to be if you're only thinking about, like, I'm stuck with this problem, social anxiety, and how do I solve it? Rather than trying to think about in terms of getting rid of the social anxiety, think about it. You could think about it in terms of merging and connecting with others. So often people with social anxiety, they may be focused on how separate they are from others. So again, a problem focus, or like the status difference between people and how that makes them feel uncomfortable. So again, they're focused on the problem. And then that causes them more anxiety. So when they go into, if you go into a social situation, you're thinking about separateness and status, it makes anxiety feel worse. But when you start to look at the social anxiety and addressing it in terms of, maybe I could work on connecting with others, it's a positive frame, but it's also a useful frame too. So I'm not saying this is, as I mentioned, like telling people just to be happy, that's very superficial, right? But when you talk about connecting, it's more tangible. It's about, like, what can I do in order to be able to relate with others? And it's also positive as well. So, and it puts people into that mindset of connection. So actually, like, what helps in terms of being with people in the social situations, when you focus on how you can connect with others rather than like how you're separate from others. Merging, connecting are action-oriented words. They tell you what you can do, right? Separateness and status, or even the word social anxiety itself, it does not tell you what you can do about the issue. And also, like, when you use these verbs, merging, connecting, these ing words, they help you focus on the process itself. So just like this picture, she's very in the flow doing her hobby. And that's because she's focused on the ing. She's focused on the action itself. And actually, like, because I actually had a very hard time getting into writing. So writing was always something that's like very difficult for me. And what really helped is when instead of trying to focus on being a writer, just on a process of writing itself, then it became much easier. Mushki.
Yeah, so I try to implement that with my social anxiety, actually. So I used to always go to social events. I think I mentioned this in the group before, like, I hope I make a friend. I hope so. And then always like, oh, I didn't make a friend. Okay, I'm not going to again. But now I think of it more like the foundation. So like, if I go to like enough events over a year or two, however long, eventually by default, I'm going to gain the skills necessary to make friends. So now I'm not disappointed if I don't make friends. I'm just proud of myself that I'm a step closer towards making friends.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes when we are focused on that one action and how that one action is going to solve everything, like, or I should solve everything with that one action. I go to this event and I should be perfectly making friends. That's not as useful. It causes a lot of pressure. But when we look at it as like, it's helpful that I went, and there's maybe certain ways I was able to connect with others, other ways I did not, and that's okay. So long as I go to enough of these events, then over time I'll develop these practice effects and be able to socialize. That's definitely a very useful kind of approach. It's very reasonable, and it takes a lot of pressure off of the process.
Thanks.
Yes. All right.
And also, like, I like the idea of like focusing on like a connection and like what you can do, right? So if you focus on social anxiety, it's like almost like disabling, you know, okay, I have anxiety, that's it. But if you focus on the positive connection or whatever, because I think a lot of reasons, like it's a two person process, like making connections, making friends. I used to like wait for people to come over to me, you know, and why don't people like me? Why aren't people? But now if I'm focusing on connection, I'm like focusing on what can I do? What's my part? What can I do for others?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yeah. That's also the most realistic thing that we can focus on. Like, we can't count on the results. So like when we connect with us, we don't know if we're going to be friends with them or not. But when we have that in our minds all the time, that makes us nervous. But when we focus on the process, just like talking and communicating with them, then we're on our way there. And at the very least, we've practiced our social skills. So again, like social anxiety, merging, connecting ing words. So this is emerging something that's positive and useful, not something that's blindly positive, like just be happy, or that doesn't give you anything tangible to work with. It's like something a step up from where we are, rather than something that's overwhelming, and something that's useful. So like people with social anxiety, the words assertiveness could be a frightening idea. So we talk about assertiveness training, that could seem really overwhelming, right? Because it said we could be focused on how unassertive we are. And like I have to make up for that by being assertive. Wow, that's a lot to deal with. So say that your values is honesty. So I look at like what the client's values are. So say they value honesty or they value fairness. It's better to look at your values and work from there. So instead of assertiveness, look at it in terms of honest feedback if you value honesty. So if you value fairness, look at it in terms of fair relationship management instead of assertiveness. It puts it more into perspective for you. It makes it something that is more intrinsic to what you want in your life, what you care about. So again, this is positive, but also a useful way to reframe looking at it. So let's do this exercise. So these are a list of values. So first of all, I want you to identify a problem that you are facing. It can be something involved with social anxiety. It could be something else. So first identify a problem. Just give yourself some time to think about that, what that is. I'll give you a bit of time. Okay, so I'll give you, you could still think about that. And after you identify a problem, you could choose a value or values that could address your problem, maybe up to 3 values. So here's a list of values: authenticity, commitment, financial security. Just think about like what values you have, and then tie it to like how you could use your value to address the problem. And I could give you examples, say like, undergoing depression, right? Have depression. Some things that I could find useful is like one thing I really enjoy is humor, right? Humor. I also like the idea of knowledge too. I like to be able to build my knowledge. And if I look at it in terms of my depression, in terms of how I could build my knowledge about how to address depression, I think it's easier for me because I like to learn. So that's a value I have, is that I like to learn. And also like, in terms of empathy, right? Being able to, because I have compassion for others, like turning that around and being compassionate on myself. So these are ways of using values to address a problem instead of just simply being focused on a problem. And when you're on your way, these are bonuses. Try to add something that's a bit positive or useful, like making it into an ing word. So I mean by that is, so that's like authenticity. We could change that to being authentic, right? Or commitment, being committed. Financial security, securing. See, that's an ing word. Humor, like telling jokes, being funny. Knowledge, gaining knowledge. being truthful, being simple, showing compassion, being creative, empathizing with, being generous. And they misspelled this word kindness. They put it as kindness, it's kindness, being kind, persevering. So like, then that makes you focus on the process itself, like when you put it into the ing word. Okay, so does anybody want to share what they have?
I couldn't tackle it. I can share my issue, but I couldn't tackle it.
Okay, all right.
My issue is motivation. I struggle a lot with motivation, like a lot. Yeah, it's like, and I don't know. Like I know, like I could use creativity and compassion to myself and courage and a lot of these things. I don't know how to like make into ing words or like empower myself yet to get motivation and energy in general.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because I realize now too that a lot of the issues that you may bring or problems that you may bring are kind of bigger problems or issues for yourself, right? So like to kind of address it with kind of like a simple exercise, it doesn't seem like that's really the full picture here. This is something that takes time. This is something that involves more processing and integration. So without holding you to an answer, what are some ways that you could use those things that you value to address motivation?
I don't know how I would use humor, although that's definitely one of my values. A lot of these are my values. That's the thing. Like most of these are, right? So these are very common values. So I'm having a hard time even picking three. But I guess if I had to pick, courage seems to apply. Like right now, I'm struggling motivation. I'm applying for my master's program in a different state. And I'm struggling with fear and motivation about like moving and everything. So courage would be a big one. And empathy towards myself. Because but like courage is not something I feel I have. So am I choosing values that I have or values that I want?
Yeah, it could be like values that you want to grow, right? Or something that you already have, like something you do care about, and you do, like you look at it like maybe there's some areas in your life in which you've experienced courage before, or you demonstrated courage before, and relate it to this problem.
Oh, I see. So like work on past successes with with these values.
Yes.
And perseverance. The first one that sticks out to me is perseverance. Perseverance. But I don't know how to make that into like a ing word.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be simply a persevering. But I know there's a lot more to this, right? So like what I'm saying here is like let's take compassion, for instance. Like kind of like a lot of what I talk about in this workshop is that we actually are in a better place to be motivated when we are not when we're more compassionate towards ourselves. So sometimes like in order to motivate ourselves, we could be very critical and we use a lot of should words or have to words, right? So when we use a should and have to words to be compassionate when we are using those should and have to words, and that kind of softens things up and kind of makes the motivation less pressured, right? And that's a good first step. I'm not saying that's like the silver bullet, but it could help significantly in a certain regards.
I say to myself, I have to be kinder to myself. I should be kinder to myself. And then I'm back to square one, right? Because I'm shooting myself about being nicer to myself.
Yeah.
I think that's my struggle.
And when you look at it, like I should be kind to myself, the words themselves, they don't seem kind, right? So like but like this is something that people normally do. So it's very common for people to tell themselves, I have to be kind to myself. So you start with changing that language around. And as I said before, like I prefer to be kind to myself, and seeing how like the energy around that softens up a bit. And that's where you're planting that seed for that compassion.
I was relating it to loneliness. Sometimes I feel lonely. Sometimes I feel lonely. And I was thinking that with that thought, I was thinking that okay, so right now I really don't want to be involved with anyone, but I'm used to being with someone. But I'm trying to build a business, so and I need to learn how to take care of myself without having a girlfriend, which I do because I have my own place and I take care of myself. But the thing is, so just in this, and for me, reframing it is instead of thinking that I'm just lonely, I'm caring more for myself. I'm being with family. I'm developing courage. I'm becoming more compassionate. Being more authentic. So that's the way that I'm kind of.
How's it like to look at it that way?
It's encouraging. It's more
encouraging.
It's encouraging. It's more positive.
There's something empowering about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Varsha.
Yes, Leon. I had an issue for the self-confidence. And that was a really big issue. Even though, it was a problem and I did not know myself. And it was for a long time it lasted. So in this list, what is your suggestion to increase self-confidence? Yes, do believe in yourself.
Okay.
And you doubt too much. I used to doubt too much myself.
Okay. How about let's kind of put away this self-confidence question for now and just ask you what are maybe 3 of your values from this list?
Values are a lot I don't know what I should say about the empathy to myself. No. The knowledge, yes. Even though I have knowledge, I still question myself, So to build the self-confidence and to believe in, to get firm with yourself, what do you think I should do exercise?
Okay. So I think you're off to a good step. Is that, first of all, you first focus on what your value is rather than necessarily seeing it in terms of what exact value could help me with the problem. So think about, let's start with empathy. And then with empathy, how could empathy help with self-confidence for you?
Empathy for myself, that even though I know that I have knowledge, then I should take easy with myself. And instead of doubting, believe in myself. Be kind to myself, kindness.
About instead of I should be kind or I should not doubt myself, how would it be like for you to say that I prefer to be kind and I prefer not to doubt myself? How does that sound?
Okay, but where ing come here? What's I should do?
Yeah. So I want you to listen to and this is what people often do. They use that should, and when you use that statement, you actually feel that tenseness build within yourself, right?
That's what just now you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I should be empathetic towards myself. It's very natural for people to say that.
Right.
But that in that tone itself, it naturally does not carry that empathy with it.
Right.
Right. So we could start with that. So it's kind of building that seed of compassion somewhere, just simply by changing the language around it. I prefer to be empathetic. I'll do the best that I can. To be compassionate
Don't say
towards
should,
myself.
But, yeah. Right.
Yeah. And how does that sound to say it that way?
Sounds light in that you can be relaxed. Yeah, it's relaxing.
Yeah, right. Something that very light. So there you have that seed of that compassion piece. Over there, just by using that phrase, you demonstrated empathy. And maybe you want to grow that empathy, but now you have a seed of it right here that you could start to grow from.
Okay, thank you.